Okay, this is Michelle again, and this beginning of part two. First, let me apologize. I didn't know I was lying when I said in part one that that was going to be an abbreviated testimony. I don't seem to be capable of that yet. Maybe once I finish this, who knows how many parts it'll be because I'm covering over 70 years of both my coming to Jesus and supernatural experiences, as well as the different belief systems I have gone through and the sins that I held on to, and how much it has been totally worth it. It's worth spending your whole life coming to Jesus if that's how long it takes. Like it just, I don't know how long I'm going to live, so maybe I won't have to say it was my whole life, but it was most of my life till now, that's for sure. Anyway, let me get on with the story. I was explaining how we had moved to College Station, Texas, my dad being a professor at A&M, and I have a feeling this might be a little askew. Hopefully that works. um, I forgot to mention that when my dad had married my stepmother, and then we moved to College Station, Texas, and that is the point at which my little brother joined us. I guess my dad didn't have the ability to do the child care when I went back when I was 11 to Burbank, and I had been begging him. I just wanted so badly to be with him again. I thought he was the only person in the world that loved me, and he was so important to me, and he did. He let me come back, and then my little brother stayed with our Aunt Retha during that next period of time until we moved to College Station. So my stepmother did not even meet her stepson until after she had already been married for many months. And as an interesting little side story there, that was a very not good idea because, as I mentioned before, my father used to unburden himself with his deep troubles that I had to keep in confidence in order not to hurt anyone. And the same thing happened with my stepmother. She would tell me things that were going on in her life, in her emotional life, and things that I couldn't also tell anyone. But I can tell you now this, that she had been married before, and she was married for 10 years, did not believe in divorce. She was what was called a Jack Mormon. In other words, all of her family was Mormon, but she and I guess her mother, who was a lifelong alcoholic, they were not very Mormon. And anyway, she did not believe in divorce, but she was so badly abused and beaten, and then finally betrayed so badly by her first husband, she decided to believe in divorce. And the really sad thing, and very odd, never know what's going to happen in this life. Big surprises happen. We have to be so careful how we step, because we can step into a lot of bad stuff just by not being more mindful and careful. And, well, what I say now is, and also checking with the Holy Spirit, checking with Jesus, checking with our Father God, checking with the Bible really helps a lot. But anyhow, she told me that my little brother, who was only at the time about just turning 6 years old, around there, reminded her of her ex-husband. That was just about one of the worst people in the world that he could have reminded her of. And there was always a very bad difficulty between him and her that I only knew about the part of how she felt, and I didn't know how my brother felt about it, but um, that was something that became a problem all along the way. Now I'm going back to my testimony, and by the way, my brother passed away when he was 46 in 2006, and that was the most painful loss I've ever experienced from anybody passing away in my life. But I'm very, very happy to know that he was already in love with Jesus. And I know he wasn't, as most of us aren't, and none of us are perfect Christians. And I know that he got a lot of things a lot askew, but I also know he really, really loved Jesus. He was really dedicated, and I just feel so glad to know that the person that it hurt me the most, that he passed away. It's so good to just feel certain that he and God have got it worked. They're going to have it worked out in some way, I just know it. And I'm so glad, and it makes me so happy to know that. Well, anyway, back to my story, my testimony. Let's see. Sorry, ever since I got Bell's palsy about 5 years ago, my eyes kind of itch a lot and stuff. It's kind of weird. My left eye's partially paralyzed as well as part of my lip, so that's why my face gets really asymmetrical sometimes. But anyway, I was telling about how we moved to College Station, and my dad was an associate professor there, and he didn't get paid all that well, probably because he wasn't a full professor. And then he had bought a house when we first came. Somebody helped him find it, but to save money, he did not do some of the things you're supposed to do before you buy a house. And it turned out that he didn't find out till we moved to Colorado that he didn't own that house because it had a lien on it. And so he lost all whatever he had invested in that. And when he found that out, when we were in Colorado, we had to move again because we had moved to a place that he thought he could afford. And so anyway, I don't know why I'm going into all that so much, because I want to talk more about when I lived in College Station. And I was trying to find answers, and I was finding answers. I thought I was finding the real answer. I needed something that just felt like it was the real answer, and that just sounded so good to me. The reincarnation thing, it's like, oh, that explains everything, it explains why do bad things happen to good people and all that sort of thing. And it's like, man, I think, whoa, I must have done some really bad things in my past life. That's what I thought. And because I was really convinced of reincarnation, and I went around, I was like a little preacher for reincarnation with all my friends. And funnily enough, there was one person that I met a little bit later that she was just stuck to her Bible, and she didn't care what I said. She was faithful, and that was beautiful to see that in a young girl. At that time, we were probably 13 years old. Anyhow, I wasn't really going around preaching to everybody, but all my good friends, any good friends, I always wanted to talk about it, and I wanted to convince them to know about reincarnation, because I thought it would make them feel better like it made me feel better. And and I thought I finally found the truth. But even though I thought I finally found the truth, I still had so many questions, and I was so frustrated that I didn't have anybody to ask. And I remember very clearly always wishing, man, I just wish I knew some old man with a big old beard that knows everything that I could go to ask my questions and so he can help me. I didn't know that I was wishing I could go to God. I didn't think of it that way. But that's what it was, because he's the only one. Well, he's three in one: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They're all three parts of the Godhead. They're in total synchronicity. Absolutely. No Alzheimer's going on there. You have communication with the Holy Spirit. It's the same thing. It's just as important and good as if you had direct communication with Jesus Christ in the flesh, or the Spirit of the Father. And anyway, let me get back to my story. So I got into reincarnation, and I got a lot of ideas, from these different books I was reading, like prophecies, which I later discovered were false prophets, but I didn't even think about the possibility of false prophets. I just figured, if it was in a book and they were psychic, they probably knew what they were talking about. And there was one prophecy that affected me a lot where he said, yes, and there's going to be a child that will be, I don't know how he put it, but it was like there was going to be a child that would come that would be the leader. And I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting. And that fits into this story later. And then I would read about the possibility of UFOs having aliens on them from outer space. I didn't read about that as much, but I did find it really fascinating, and I must have read a story or two of people who had claimed to be on spaceships. That was around the time Betty and Barney Hill were very famous. They had a testimony of being abducted and taken onto what people used to call flying saucers. And they were hypnotized, and it was just, they made a real big deal about it in the media. It was in those, we used to have magazines that just about everybody read, and if you didn't even have your own subscription, it would always be in the doctor's office or the dentist's office. And back then you had to wait hours in the dentist's office or the doctor's office, so you had lots of time to read those magazines. Time, Life, all that. Anyway, Look, that was another big one. Anyway, that one or more of those books, magazines, did long, big, in-depth stories about Betty and Barney Hill, and I believe they were a mixed race couple. I believe he was black and she was white. And I remember thinking, oh, maybe that's why the aliens picked them, because they thought that was interesting. Because back then that was very unusual, highly unusual, to have mixed race couple between black and white. And but anyway, I read it and I believed it. I thought, oh wow, there's flying. That was one thing about me, and I still have to watch it. And I'm not sure why I'm that way, or maybe most women are this way. I really don't know, but I just tend to believe it. If somebody says it in a really convincing way, and I don't know any better, which most of my life I didn't know any better, then I believed it. Unless I really didn't like it, and then I'd say, well, I don't believe that because I don't like it. So that was my great way of discerning things. If I didn't like it, it wasn't true, and if I liked it, then it had to be true. Anyhow, I remember one night laying in my bed in that house that had no curtains. It was windows. It was, you would think it was built like a greenhouse. It had those roll up, those windows, you roll them in and roll them out. And my bedroom had two walls of windows, no curtains. And so at night, I knew that if somebody were outside and I had the light on, they could see me, but I couldn't see them. So it always felt a little. I didn't worry about it too much or anything until that one horror book I read talking about some serial killer that goes and looks in people's windows at night. That really scared me, but I wasn't much into horror stories. I think especially after reading that one, it was very hard to live in a house full of windows with no curtains after that. Anyhow, I remember laying in bed one night, the lights off, and I was trying to psychically communicate with the with the people or whatever they were on the UFOs. Because I wanted to get on one. I wanted to experience. I thought that sounded like a really interesting adventure. And I remember saying, "Oh, please, if you're out there and if you can hear me, come get me and let me get on your spaceship. I just really want to do it. That would be so interesting and fun." And then I remember right after I did that, I thought, "Oh no, I'm not sure what this is." And then I said, "But not if it's going to scare me." I put in that caveat, not if it's going to scare me. That's a caveat I've had a lot in my life. It's not a bad one. I think it's good to not get scared. I really do. I love it. Anyway, I did many years later have an experience which seemed like a UFO abduction, but that's not into the story yet because that was many years later. Okay, so while I was there, I just really, I didn't, I just got really comfortable with the idea that reincarnation was true. And then as time went on, if I saw any books that were written by people who believed in reincarnation, then I'd think, oh, this is a good book. And I'd get into it. So anyhow, we ended up having to move to Colorado. And then my dad discovered we didn't own the house. And then we had to give up the house we had moved into, which we were in the process of buying. And then we had to move. We actually, at first, we had moved to Littleton, Colorado, which is the same town where they had that awful shooting at Columbine High School. But I didn't go to Columbine. The part of town that we lived in was within the borders where I went to what was called Arapahoe High School, which turned out to be the high school of the really rich kids. I was not in my element there. I didn't even know how to. All I knew was that all these girls, I was in the habit of watching to see how many times their outfits would change, because when you're in high school, you're so self-conscious about, oh, is what I'm wearing okay, and all of that. And well, there were people, I never saw them wear anything twice. And I was like, whoa, my wardrobe was pretty much 5 or 6 choices. And I just had to, I couldn't do anything about that, but it was very weird. Anyhow, while I was there at Arapahoe, that's a time I don't want to skip over, because that was some pretty creepy things happened there. For some reason, I don't know what got me started on it, because when I had been reading, by this time I was like 15. Okay, I think I left that out. I was about 15 or turning 15. And whereas when I was 12, I wasn't interested in witchcraft. when I was at Arapahoe High School. Maybe, I don't know why. For some reason, I thought, ooh, I want to be a witch. That sounded really fun. It was all about adventure and fun for me, you know. It wasn't that I wanted to control other people or that I wanted power. I just I don't know. I just wanted to explore it. I don't know really what my reason was, to tell you the truth. And I was in a geometry class. I think it was geometry. And there was a guy that sat behind me. His name was Chuck. And I was a pretty shy person, but somehow he and I ended up talking a little bit. And I don't know how it came up, but I had told him, I said, oh, I really want to be a witch. I wish I knew how. I had no idea, and I didn't know of any books. If Thank goodness for me that there weren't any books back then that you could just go buy how to be a witch, because I would have bought one. I'm pretty sure I would have. And all I knew about witchcraft was totally bogus, you know, and I knew it was bogus, you know, that Samantha twitching her nose on that show called Bewitched. But anyhow, Chuck, he said, well, I don't know about that. I think he said something like this. I don't know much about witchcraft, but I know how to do spells that work. And I was like, oh, really? You do? Can you teach me? He said, sure, it's really easy. And he drew a pentagram. If I remember correctly, it was a pentagram. Now that I think about it, I'm not really certain anymore. It could have been that one that people call the Star of David, which is not really the Star of David, but I'm not going to get into history in my testimony here, but I really believe that the Star of David was something brought in by ungodly influences in Israel, in the Jewish church, or whatever you want to call it, synagogue. Anyhow, it was a pentagram, and I don't remember much about it. There might have it was real simple. That's the main thing I remember. It was really simple. And he said, and you just need to get like I think it was a photograph was the best, if you could get a photograph of the person that you're going to put a spell on. But if you didn't have a photograph, there was probably some other way that I don't remember. And then he told me how to do it. And then he said, but there's just one thing. And I said, what's that? He said, you can't do anything good with it. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, you can't do a spell on somebody and it can't be good. It has to be something bad. I mean, boy, that told it all right away. I didn't realize it yet, but that was the first sign that he was a Satanist, because he sure was. And I was already so excited about doing the spell because I wanted to see if it worked. That was the main thing. I just wanted to see if it worked. But I didn't want to do anything bad to anybody, and so that was quite a conundrum. But I thought I figured it out, you know. Boy, when people think that they can outsmart the devil, just forget it. He is so smart. He's not smarter than God. He's way dumber than God. But he's smarter than us. Just believe it. Just believe it. He is so good at deception, and he has thousands and thousands of years experience with it, and he knows things that we don't know because he used to live up in the spirit world with God the Father. I mean, the dude is really, you just don't want to mess with him. I didn't know all that at the time. All I knew was, and I didn't even know if I believed in the devil, but I think I sort of did. I think I sort of, Yeah. In fact, I remember. It's so funny. I'm okay. I'm gonna remember to get back to the spell. But I was remembering that when I was about 8 years old, it was just before we were given back to my dad. Our mother had custody of us, and we had babysitters that were actually the parents of her fiance. At the time, they then married and were married for the rest of her life. But anyway, it was at his parents' house, and they weren't very friendly. At least they weren't very friendly to me. Now, for all I know, they were friendly to other people. But of course, now being an adult and looking back, I realize more what was going on. They were not very happy about me being a child of a previous husband of my mother, and so that's probably that might have been the only reason they were really cold toward me. And so anyway, when I was over there, there was really nothing to do, and there was definitely no conversation to have. I don't think they even had a TV. If they did, I didn't know where it was. And so I would always go in their yard and just play in the yard. It would just be for a few hours till my mother and her fiance would come pick me up every day after school. And can't believe I just told you all of that, and the story I'm about to tell you was not there. But it is something I left out in my story. So there you go. For a while, I was being babysat by my mother's fiance. And anyhow, it was a different place. It was a different place. And it had a big backyard. And I was playing with somebody. It must have been just a neighbor kid. I have no idea who it was. And we decided, back then people didn't use toys so much, or at least in my life we didn't. We just would go outside and play and make up things, get with sticks and mud or whatever. And there was a shovel out there. And so we decided we were going to dig for the devil. Because, we both knew that we'd been told that the devil was under the ground. He was way down there, and hell, that's where hell was. And so we'd go and we'd hit the stick into the ground and pull out some dirt, and then we'd pretend like we saw the devil, and we'd go, "Ah, I saw him!" And then we'd run away, and then we'd come back and then dig some more. And that was actually a game I played when I was probably more like 7. Anyway, so I kind of believed in the devil and I kind of didn't. I just really didn't know. And so back to the spell. See, it showed me how to do the spell and it looked really easy. But now I had to figure out, how am I going to do a spell where I'm not allowed to do anything good, but I don't want to hurt anybody. So the way, my little workaround was, I will get permission from somebody to do something to them which is not good. And there was this girl, I didn't know her, I didn't hardly know her at all, and that was in another one of my classes. And there was something about her, she was very, what I would call back then, prissy. Just very, everything was very just so, and that was around the time that some people stopped wearing pantyhose, or maybe everybody wore them. I can't really remember. Most people wore pantyhose back then, and I was always getting runs in mine, and so I thought, well, I bet she never gets runs in her pantyhose because she's so prissy. So I asked her, hey, I'll call her Julie because I don't remember her name. I said, hey, Julie, do you ever get runs in your hose? Oh, she said, oh, I never do. I thought, oh, perfect, because I wanted to ask you a favor. And she said, well, what's that? I said, I want to do a spell that somebody showed me how to do. and I just want to see if it works. But the problem is, I'm not allowed to do anything good. It's got to be something bad. And so I was wondering if I could have your permission to put runs in your hose. And then, and I said we could do it in this, like this control experiment, scientific way, where we'd have a third person. And, like, for instance, I would tell the third person, but nobody else, what day I was going to put a run in her hose and whether it would be her left leg or her right leg. And I'd say about what time it would happen. And so that third person, she, I would give her that information and she would just know it but not reveal it. And then I would do the spell and say, okay, she's going to get a run in her right leg hose by 5 o'clock on Monday. And then, on Tuesday, I'd say, hey, Julie, did you get a run in your hose yesterday? And she'd say, yeah, I did. I was like, wow, and then the third person, I'd bring the third person who was in that same class with her and say, yeah, that's what it says on here, that it was going to be on Monday by 5 o'clock. And she said, well, that's about the time it happened. And I says, whoa, we have to do it a few times to make sure this is really true, not just, dumb luck or whatever the people used to call it, coincidence. So I did it several more times. I'm not sure exactly how many more times, but my guess would be 2 to 3 more times where I would give the third person the day of the week it was going to be and probably what kind of time of day, whether it be morning or afternoon or evening. And every time she would admit, yes, she got a run on the day that I said, around the time that it said. And so finally, after we did it at least 3 times, possibly more. And after we'd done it that many times, one day in class she said, Michele, don't do it anymore. I removed my permission. She said, I don't believe it, but I'm tired of having to buy new hose. And so I thought, wow, this is great. Well, I found out that it worked. Couldn't use it. I didn't want to use it because I didn't want to hurt anybody, but that was very exciting to me to find out that it worked. And so I told Chuck, the guy in class, about my experiment, and I said, wow, it really worked. And he ended up inviting me to, I don't remember what he called it, but he invited me, I guess it was to his house. He said, we're going to have a group of people, and we're going to, I don't remember what he called it. He might have said it was like a seance, because I knew what the word seance meant. But he kind of made it sound like it was something sort of like a seance. He said, we're all going to get together, and we're going to get the devil to come visit in person. And I didn't know if I believed totally in the devil, but I knew for sure that if he existed, I did not want to see or meet him. So I said, thanks, but no thanks. I do not have any interest in the devil. And that was pretty much the end of me and Chuck, except for, because he knew I wanted to be a witch, he knew of a lady that was a, what do you call it? Bloodline witch, where it ran in her family that they were witches. And I knew who she was. He told me who it was. It was somebody a year older than me, very pretty girl. She seemed very nice. And he said I'll just say her first name. Her name was Nancy. He said, Nancy, she's a witch. And her whole family is witches. And so she could give you some information. And somehow I ended up at a party I don't know how I ended up there or how I got invited. That part doesn't make sense because I think that's the only party I went to the whole entire time we lived in Littleton. So Chuck might have, you know, Chuck might have had something to do with that. He might have made sure that I got invited. There was a lot of people there, and I saw Nancy, and you know, I was a little bit shy, and she was not very outgoing, and I was kind of scared of her as far as I just wanted her to like me, but I had no idea what I could do to make her like me. And I told her, I said, well, you know, I heard you're a witch. And she didn't deny it. And then I said, well, I really want to be a witch. Would you teach me how to do something? And I don't remember any more of the conversation between me and her, but I know that I definitely expressed to her my great thirst in wanting to be a witch and wanting to learn how. And I figured she must be a good witch because Chuck already knew that I didn't want to do the bad spells. And by then I'd heard of good witches and bad witches. So she said, well, okay, come upstairs with me and we'll do something. And so I went up, and I guess it was her bedroom. And what she did, she had these like little flashcards, and it was like a psychic experiment what she did with me to see whatever natural psychic abilities I might have. And it was like she'd put a card down and she'd say, well, what do you think it is? Something to that effect. I really can't remember exactly anymore, but it was that kind of a thing where you're going in blind, and the person running the test is trying to figure out how psychic you are. And at the end of it, she said, yeah, you did pretty good. And that was the end of the lesson. She had nothing else to say to me, and I was not gonna. Thank goodness I was too shy to bother her about it any further. And she didn't really seem real keen on teaching me anything, so that was the end of that. Thank you, Holy Spirit. I can see things like this in my life where I was going directly towards something that would have not been good, and I got spared it. I got spared so many things that I would have walked right into and wanted to walk right into. But I really believe that Jesus was there. He was always there. I couldn't see him, and I wasn't thinking about him, but he was there protecting me. I just know it. Well, anyway, I still had all my crazy beliefs, you know, about reincarnation, and I forgot to mention I had been really into numerology. I'd gotten into that from my occult books, and I would figure out, you know, I'd change my first name so I could be the number I wanted to be. Like, oh, a number so-and-so is really popular, and I wanted to be more popular, so I went to be a different number to be a more popular name. And I went through several first names in my teenagehood. I didn't go back to my name that I was given at birth of Michele until I was close to 20. And anyway, how did I get off on that? Yeah, so I'd been really into numerology. In fact, the school newspaper when I was in, like, what grade was I in? I think it was maybe the beginning of ninth grade. Somebody in one of my classes found out I was into numerology, and she wanted to write a story on it. And so I was in the school newspaper that I sought the future in numbers or something. And it's really funny because you'd think in a town where I thought it was a mostly Christian town, you'd think at least one person might have said something to me that would, you know, that in the Bible you're not supposed to do that or something. I'm really surprised that no one gave me correction ever about that. There's a lot of things I've done in my life. I just look back and I'm really surprised that nobody said anything to me about it. So anyhow, I definitely had a life where there wasn't much gospel going on, people talking about it. Anyway, so after we moved away from Arapahoe, I had actually met one person there who was like me, just kind of felt like a odd one out of the bunch and didn't have many or hardly any friends, and she didn't live too far from me, and she and I became friends and stayed friends even after we moved to Denver. And oh, then I ended up wanting to go visit College Station again the next summer, and I made the money I needed so that I could take a Greyhound bus to go from Denver to College Station and stay with friends and be there for a week or two. And I think that's where I'll start in my next portion, which will be how I got introduced to the hippie generation. I was, I think 15 still, about to turn 16, not there yet. And I had never smoked pot or anything, but I'd read these big articles in Life magazine or whatever those big magazines were at the time about how dangerous marijuana was, and how crazy people would be when they smoked it, and it all looked pretty scary. I was really not very attracted to it, but I also really curious because I was just always curious about everything. And anyway, it was that summer when I took the Greyhound bus to College Station that I got introduced to marijuana and LSD. But that will be in the next story. And that will be part 3. And this is the ending of part 2. And I just want to say, I just want to cover these things and cover some of the strange experiences I've had. And I know sometimes I'm going to forget them while I'm telling the story, and then I'll have to go back a little bit and tell you something that already happened, but I forgot to mention it. One other thing that happened when I was living in Littleton, Colorado, before we moved to Denver, I just loved astrology. Oh, I wanted to be an astrologer. That was what I'd find. I was always trying to figure out, what do I want to be when I grow up, kind of thing, you know. I wanted to be an astrologer. And I went and I remember got this big, thick book. It was like really big, thick book at the library that had all the details of how you do it, you know, all the math that's involved and everything. And it didn't take me very long to figure out that, oh, well, I guess I don't want to do this. My brain was not, yeah, I couldn't do all that math stuff, and that was before people had computerized astrology going on. So I was really disappointed, and I kind of thought I might want to be an actress. And my dad did not want me to be an actress because that's what my mother had been. That's why we had moved to California, was because she wanted to be a movie star. And when he worked at E.F. Hutton, he worked on the same lot as Universal Studios, and he had discovered that, he said, none of those people are happy. He met a lot of celebrities. I met a few there during a summer vacation. He had only met one that he thought was a happy person out of all of them. And he said, "You don't want to get into that." And he was very, very down on me acting. And he knew that my mother had been into it, so he would never come to see if I was in a school play or a summer play. And apparently I was considered pretty good as an actress, but I realized from being in the big school play that how much it takes over your life. And because it was a guy who had been a professional director in New York, this rich school. They had to get a real director, a real playwright, or whatever he was. He was a very grumpy guy and very particular, and we rehearsed all the time, and it was just it was very emotional. I was shy, but I wasn't allowed to be shy anymore, because to be in the play and do the things I had to do, like cry facing the audience, that just was so hard for me to do. And actually, after I came out of doing that, I was a different person. I wasn't so shy anymore. It did break my shyness, but it also broke my interest in wanting to turn to acting as my future career, because I realized it would take over all my time and everything, and I didn't want to give that much to any career. This is one smart, I didn't always make smart decisions, but that was another smart decision. See, I've already mentioned at least two. One, I didn't want to meet the devil, and two, I didn't want to have my life taken over by being acting. And I have to notice these things, so it's not all bad that went on in my life. And like I said, I really believe it's the Holy Spirit and Jesus that got me through so many things. And so anyway, I have to put a memory marker on where we are here. I'm going to say this is where transitioning over to Denver, and that'll be where I'll be starting in mostly, is in my next part 3 is in Denver, and that's where I first was getting into things like wanting to do astral projection and other dark things, because that is a dark thing, and it's fine to leave your body if an angel of God, and it really is an angel of God, comes to get you and takes you to heaven. And if that's the case, you won't have a choice. You'll just be taken. And but if you do astral projection, and this took me many years to find out, that's why I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. If you do astral projection, and it's not because Jesus or an angel of God came to get you, it's a demon. It's a demon. You're using demonic powers, or they're using you actually, to take you out of your body. You might think you're in control, but guess what? You're not. That's what the demons are really good at, is making you think it was your idea, but they're really just trying to take you down that wide, wide path to hell. They really are, and they really hate you. And most of them these days, many of them, I can't say most, I don't know the numbers, but many of them will pretend that they love you, and they will pretend that they're ascended masters and spirit guides and all that stuff. Don't believe it. And, if you have a choice in the matter, do not do it. Do not. That's just my warning here. But anyway, we'll be talking about Denver starting with part 3. God bless.